Hello, today I'll be talking about the 7 densities of body-mind. So what I refer to as body-mind intelligence or consciousness is the form of which all creation takes on, and what density of consciousness is correlated or most connected with that form. So when I refer to the red ray, which is the base consciousness, it is determined as something, as the vibration and the state of resonance that is slowest and is the least conscious. And when I talk about the highest ray, which is the violet ray, or the crown chakra, that density of consciousness in terms of the body is going to be the light body, which is a higher density, meaning that there's higher quotient of light within those particles and waves of the molecular structure of that form. So just beginning here, the first red ray body consciousness is that of the red chakra, or the root chakra, and that is correlated with the reproductive organs, and that is the first density. It's the beingness and awareness. It's timeless. It is that place where even before organic life and bacteria and microorganisms started to reproduce, there was this state of survival of the one infinite consciousness, and it was much like planets or asteroids or just rocks floating through space. They're just kind of basically surviving and as a form, and that red ray consciousness is also present within us to a very great extent, and that is most correlated with the earth consciousness or earth intelligence and the element of earth. So that quality of consciousness is very rigid. It's very it's foundational, it's structured, it's not very expansive, it's very contained in its own intelligence and its own existence. It's not referring to anybody else. It's very self-sufficient also. So it just worries about itself and its own survival, and it is the state of true non-duality and perfect unity. It's kind of like, in terms of human experience, if we are operating from the survival red ray, then we are very much inspired or dispositioned towards the sexual reproduction and towards feeding ourselves and making sure that we have our basic survival needs met. So that's so we don't really have to think as much. So we can just kind of aimlessly float around in space like that rock or asteroid. And it's kind of like, if we have all of our needs met, then we can just float around and in space and kind of not have to make as many decisions based on our own affinity or our own intelligence, our own preferences, our own biases. We're just making decisions based on purely out of survival, and this is not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just like the base, very foundational consciousness where all life has to be activated from. And those with a strong sense of this can ultimately reach violet, blue, higher density energy and consciousness, because they are self-sufficient in their own survival and they don't rely on others. The less that you rely on other people or other external things, the more that you can actually strengthen the red ray. So don't think or insist that it is a certain particular, it's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just the quality of that state of vibration. And by the way, we're always operating and vibrating and balancing each and every quality of consciousness in our physical vehicle. So, and our non-physical vehicle, because each of these bodies or each of these intelligences have their corresponding forms and their corresponding multi-dimensional form. So that red ray is, again, how we survive in the world, survive out in the and float around kind of without thinking. So this is the awareness that goes on without even being aware of it. It's the awareness that is aware of the thoughts you are thinking. And tapping into this is extremely beneficial for you to really get a grasp on what you have come from, what your origin, and what your blank slate is. It's a very positive way to neutralize any negative thoughts. So going on, we have the second density body, which is the orange ray body, and that has to do with growth and movement, and that's in a large scale, it's the beginning of microbiomes and bacteria, and within each density there's 7 subdensities, and then within each 7 subdensity there's 7 sub-subdensities, and it keeps going inwardly on infinitely subtle hues or variations of color. So a high red ray and a low orange ray density consciousness is going to have that blend of red and orange, and same throughout the densities. So when a density or consciousness is activated, it means that it is of highest priority and highest functioning, and when it's potentiated, it means it's less functioning and less prioritized in your own consciousness. And of course, this isn't done on a normal, conscious level. Like, we don't get to decide, oh, I want to activate the violet ray body. Like, it's much more subtle than that. You can intend that, and that will be wonderful. However, you need to be able to subtly know that vibration on a intuitive level that is only describable by the feeling and by experiential subjectivity. So the orange ray is the second density, and it's the sacrum area. It's around the tailbone or the pelvis, and that has to do with your your personal self. It has to do with the self interactions. So how you please yourself. It has to do with once we get the survival red ray established, then we're able to expand a little bit more and polarize and make our preferences and biases towards what it is that we want to experience on a subjective level. And the orange ray is those things that give you make you feel good, essentially. It's the pleasure, it's the it's also great pain, and it's definitely has to do with the personal identity, because it has to do with how you identify and prefer and are calibrating your own consciousness and what things that you are going to experience rather than those things that you're not going to experience. So the orange ray has to do with the self and finding your own truth, essentially, your own beliefs, your own distortions, if you will, your own point of view, because that is where you're going to base all the rest of the foreground of consciousness. So the background of consciousness is going to be the red ray, orange ray, and yellow ray, and that's the foundation of all intelligence. And the foreground, which is much more dynamic, it's much more malleable, it's much less rigid and much less solid. It's metaphysical, it's transparent, it's light, it's pure light. It's more, as you go up through the densities, there's more and more light, and it's not trapped as it would be in dense physical matter. So the orange ray is awareness of the being and the emotional state, the free will of your personal preferences and what you want to experience on a moment-to-moment basis. So this intelligence is oftentimes unconscious to those who don't know why they are doing what they're doing, like continuously going through patterns and repetitious cycles of pain and pleasure, because their orange personal identity is not clear. There's a little bit distortion there, so it's not pure and cleansed, if you will, because it is the infinite enabler, and it is the place where you can essentially take all that you have experienced and filter it into this subjective state of me. It's very much the me state. So it's correlated with water. It's very sensitive. It's very receptive to external experience because it takes things personally. The orange ray is a personal ray, and if you're very much like operating from this, in general, you're going to take a lot of things personal. So definitely personal identity is important, and what you get your pleasure from and what it is that you need in order to feel good and feel emotionally secure and stable. The orange ray is excellent for that, and it's the harnessing of that emotional stability and the self-awareness and personal self, and how that you interact with that self. You being that awareness that is beyond, that is aware of thoughts. The awareness that is aware of thoughts is aware of that personal self and is allowing it to be, so to speak. So going on, the yellow ray, which is the solar plexus, has to do with societal relations, and it has to do with your social interactions with people. So once you've identified what you personally want and personally believe on the orange ray, and have taken care of your basic survival needs, you go out into the world and are able to demonstrate those personal and foundational energy centers and able to project them out in the distortion and bias that you want to project. And that has to do with societal interaction, places in society. So the place that you are assuming in society is very much that role of power, that it gives you a sense of influence on others. It gives you a sense of not only power, but ability to choose. Your ability to choose how you interact with people and how you will treat them. And it's very much has to do with, the fire element and how you can best harness that transformative kind of consciousness that transfers from one individual to another, and being able to morph and alchemize that energy that you get from others, so that you can are able to utilize that for your own personal identity and your own societal interactions. Because at this level of consciousness, we're making choices and becoming more self-aware of ourselves, and how that we actually have much more effectiveness in our own ability to react. Fire is a very reactionary and effective element, and it can, you can choose to be service to self, which is having to do with, being powerful over others. So enjoy your own sustenance, your own satisfaction from taking that away from others, and that's service to self. And that is very much what we would associate with being bad or wrong or evil. And on the other hand, there's service to others, and that is that we are actually the other person. We're coming from that place of that person, the perspective of that we are the other person, and we are all one. So what we do for the other, we're actually benefiting ourselves, and that would be what we consider the right thing, or the correct thinking, or the good guys, or whatever, the good in the world. So as we make ourselves more aware of how we can make choices each and every moment, and basically each choice comes down to a common denominator of service to self or service to others. And the more that we choose one polarity or the other, the more that we polarize towards that polarity. And that's the lessons of third density that we're going through right now. And we're actually towards the end. We're almost in fourth density, which I'll get to. But we're learning how our choices make a very accelerated and immediate reaction on others the more that we get closer to fourth density consciousness and self-awareness. Our own intelligence becomes more green ray, but as yellow ray, we're finishing off our lessons, and we're finishing off what it is we want to decide for polarity. And if we want to go towards the service to self route and service to others, to a large extent, the world has chosen service to others. And the more aware that you become of each choice you make as being a choice of service for the other person, the more that you're able to polarize and make yourself more powerful in that aspect. And that is activating the yellow ray, the solar plexus. And that has to, again, to do with social interactions. So very important how you conduct yourself around others, because that is activating your fire chakra, your solar plexus, and that is potentially, it could be you could be dominating, you could be demonstrative and very, in your face presence, or you could be more loving, caring, nurturing, and like also independent of other people. So you don't need so much to rely on others, but you're there to also offer any benefit that you could possibly spare. And that means, you're coming from a place of red and orange of survival and personal identity that's very strong, so that you feel confident and comfortable with giving something, no matter how small or how seemingly insignificant or others, while also feeling comfortable in your own skin and feeling, because the more comfortable you are in your own skin, the more that people will feel comfortable around you. So that's very much the service to others path, is becoming more identified with that service and that ability to give back to others in small and spontaneous ways. So if we are a service to self being, that if you choose service to self, which is very much the path of the elite, which is very much the path of people going into scenarios based on their own interests and their own personal progression in the hierarchy. There's very much a hierarchy in service to self consciousness, where there's a power structure, and the more that you go towards that route, the more that you activate the three base chakras, which are red, orange, and yellow, and you actually skip the green chakra, which is the heart chakra, and you go to the blue chakra, which is the throat. And without going too much into that, service to self entities are not interested in caring for others and showing unconditional love, or speaking about loving things that bring people together and help people appreciate each other or be grateful. So if you're activating those three chakras and you don't activate the heart chakra, which we're learning to do now as a civilization, then you're gonna basically use your throat chakra and your yellow chakra, your solar plexus, so that you can profess and disseminate your own philosophy and your own kind of power speak, and your own self-talk that you give yourself towards empowering and making yourself more of a dominant or favorable position over other people in society. And we see that all the time with politicians and celebrities. And I'm not saying all of them are good or bad. This is very unconscious to them. They don't know that they're operating from this consciousness, this state of consciousness, but they're very much having to skew their own words, their own thoughts, so that basically they're lying, and they're able to manipulate others in thinking that, or not telling them the truth, the whole truth. Like, they won't tell or help them how to help themselves. They won't give back service to others. They will just keep all their secrets to themselves. And we're experiencing this a great extent right now, where we're learning how to come out and to express ourselves in a transparent way. And that has to do with the green ray is the heart. You're opening your heart, you're being vulnerable, you're giving out your secrets, you're giving away all that you're holding on to. so that you don't distort yourself in a way that is going to make that preference of feeling separate than others and feeling excluded, because once you feel separated, you feel like you have to put yourself in a better position to survive, to have a personal identity, and to have a social identity that is more stronger or more powerful than others. And that's very much service to self again. So as we move on to the green ray, we talk about how, it's the universal love, and it's that place where we experience unconditional love and transparency. Transparency is what we're seeing in social media now, and the sharing of content, and this amazing creativity that's blowing up around the globe, and how people are becoming more outgoing and becoming more transparent and less secretive, and less afraid of what others will think. So the more that you're able to unconditionally love yourself, the more that you can give that permission for other people to love you unconditionally. And you do that by really expressing your gratitude and giving thanks and doing the things that are of your heart's desire, because the more that you go on that kind of personal care and that self-love and do the things that are important to you, the more happy you will be ultimately, the more emotionally stable you will be, and more comfortable in your own skin, so that other people can be comfortable around you, and that they can also emulate what you are doing and try it out for themselves, try self-love and faith and trust out, and being vulnerable, so that they can also give back to others that are not yet able to see that, are not yet able to unconditionally love themselves. So it's very much a chain effect, and we're seeing this in society today, where people are learning from other, Joe Schmoes, other people that are posting online, and we don't have to no longer go to the power structures of the universities and the centralized intelligences that are of the past. We don't have to go and learn about being and living in the world so much. We can go to others online and learn about how they're doing it, so that we can do it for ourselves and ultimately lead a more peaceful and blissful, joyful, grateful life that is reducing stress, reducing disease, reducing violence, reducing all these things. And when you're living from the heart, you become much more psychic, because you're very much sensitive to all those things that are not of that love vibration, or of that understanding that we are all one. Because as a service to others consciousness or person, you understand on some degree, and you live to some degree, that what you are is what everybody else is, and you feel more connected. And this gives rise to a higher psychic availability, a higher extrasensory perception, that you are able to be of greater service to others, one, and also be more in tune with your own alignment and your own peace, your own love, and make decisions based on that. So the green ray is that place where we're connecting our minds artificially through technology and internet, but also we're connecting our minds on a much more subtle level that is making us more psychic. And depending on which route you want to go, it's going to kind of branch off a little bit and split, for instance, but it's all in the efforts of trying to connect the human race. And just a little bit of my own distortion and own bias, I have a belief that we have a possibility or potential within the human state, the human consciousness, to go towards a technologically advanced civilization. However, the power structures that own all the technology companies and all the advanced equipment and knowledge, ultimately, are going to have that one up on all the others. So basically, if we go towards technologically advanced, we're going towards service to self civilization, where we're going to be out to get the latest and greatest technology, out to go get the latest and greatest DNA or species or resources from other civilizations at the expense of like killing them and destroying their civilization. So that would be skipping the heart chakra and living purely from command and conquer kind of place. So there is that possibility, but in my reality, I'm not going towards that. I'm going towards the much more holistic life, where we're actually becoming more in tune with consciousness and our own intelligence and our own life mastery that is much more subtle and psychic and internal. So that's just the one I'm experiencing. I hope you guys can choose to come along with me. And that's really important. It's the air element, the heart chakra, and that has to do with connecting and information. We're exchanging a lot of information, so that's not only consciously with like our throats and our voices and with our work and all the things we do in our day-to-day life, but it's going on unconsciously and subconsciously through the social interaction